What if a fully equipped modern infantry platoon clashed directly with a veteran Roman legion? At first glance, you might think modern rifles make this an absolute slaughter. But the Roman Empire did not conquer the known world by being disorganized or easily broken. Because when a modern commander relies too heavily on technology, arrogance becomes a fatal weakness. And the scariest part is what happens when modern soldiers face the terrifying psychological weight of the Roman war machine. When a wall of interlocking shields absorbs the initial shock, and thousands of gladii violently push forward. If you love realistic military what-if battles, subscribe to Clash of Eras Warfare before the first shot is fired. The battlefield is a vast, rolling plain surrounded by dense European forests. A freezing, torrential downpour has turned the ground into a treacherous sea of deep mud. Thick morning fog clings tightly to the earth, severely limiting visibility to barely 200 yards. These brutal conditions instantly neutralize the greatest advantage of modern warfare: extreme range. Standing on a slight, muddy ridge is a standard 40-man United States Army infantry platoon. They're heavily armed with M4 carbines, M249 squad automatic weapons, and 2 M240B machine guns. Their chest rigs are packed with fragmentation grenades and hundreds of rounds of 5.56 ammunition. But their expensive optical sights are completely coated in freezing rain and heavy condensation. And their tactical radios are struggling to push clear signals through the dense, stormy atmosphere. Emerging slowly from the thick fog below them is the terrifying might of the ancient world. A full, veteran Roman legion, consisting of roughly 5,000 hardened infantrymen, is marching forward. This is not a disorganized barbarian horde screaming wildly into the unknown. This is a flawless, highly engineered military machine moving in absolute, terrifying silence. They are clad in heavy lorica segmentata, layered iron armor designed to deflect brutal blows. Each man carries a massive, curved wooden scutum shield covered in heavy leather and iron edging. In their right hands, they grip the lethal pilum, a heavy iron armor-piercing javelin. And at their hips rests the gladius, the brutal short sword that conquered the Mediterranean. The modern platoon leader stares through his wet binoculars in complete, stunning disbelief. He is watching a literal sea of iron and red fabric advance with mechanical, rhythmic precision. The sheer psychological weight of 5,000 silent, marching men is incredibly suffocating. The modern soldiers possess the firepower to easily obliterate hundreds of targets in seconds, but they are facing an enemy whose entire military doctrine is built upon absorbing massive casualties. Roman centurions march confidently alongside the tight formations, carrying only their vine staffs.
They enforce a level of absolute, unbreakable discipline that modern armies struggle to comprehend. The freezing rain violently beats down against the heavy Roman shields, creating a deafening roar. The deep mud aggressively sucks at the modern soldiers' combat boots, anchoring them in place. If the modern platoon tries to retreat, the mud will instantly drain their tactical stamina. They are forced to hold this muddy ridge and rely entirely on overwhelming, sustained firepower. But the heavy rain is actively fighting against their modern, gas-operated weapon systems. Water and thick mud are violently splashing into open ejection ports and hot weapon receivers. A single grain of wet dirt in the wrong mechanical place can cause a fatal weapon malfunction. The Roman legion reaches the base of the ridge, completely unaffected by the miserable weather. They thrive in the mud, relying purely on raw human muscle and unbreakable formation cohesion. The Roman commander casually raises his heavily armored arm, and the entire legion instantly halts. The sudden, flawless stop of 5,000 men is far more terrifying than any unorganized war cry. The distance between the two vastly different eras
is now exactly 150 yards. The modern squad automatic weapons are violently deployed, bipods sinking deep into the wet earth. Safeties are quietly flicked off, leaving only a cold, mechanical click in the heavy rain. The Roman commander drops his arm, and a single, sharp trumpet blast pierces the dense fog. The front sentries instantly lock their massive shields together, forming an impenetrable wooden wall. They begin to slowly march up the muddy ridge, closing the deadly gap with terrifying patience. The modern platoon leader takes a deep breath, fighting the icy chill creeping down his spine. He screams the order to open fire, unleashing absolute, deafening mechanical hell upon the ancient world. The deafening roar of 40 modern assault rifles violently shatters the morning silence. Searing hot brass aggressively ejects into the freezing mud as the squad automatic weapons open up. Thousands of 5.56 millimeter rounds tear down the muddy slope at supersonic speeds. The Roman front line takes the absolute brunt of the catastrophic kinetic impact. Heavy wooden scutum shields simply explode outward into thousands of lethal splinters. Iron armor plates shatter and buckle, violently driven deep into the flesh beneath. The front rank of the legendary Roman legion is instantly and brutally erased. Men are violently thrown backward, their heavy armor clanking sickeningly against the wet mud. A thick mist of hot pink blood violently mixes with the freezing torrential rain. For the first time in centuries, the unbreakable Roman formation physically staggers. The centurions watch in absolute, paralyzing horror as their men are torn apart. There are no arrows in the sky, no visible siege engines, no enemy charging.
Just an uninterrupted, terrifying crackling noise that brings invisible, instant death. The psychological shock of automatic gunfire is completely shattering their ancient reality. A veteran Roman soldier expects to see his killer and feel the push of a shield. He cannot comprehend a weapon that kills the man behind him before the sound arrives. Panic violently ripples through the usually disciplined ranks as the slaughter continues. But the Roman military machine is built upon an absolute, merciless foundation of discipline. Centurions brutally beat terrified soldiers with their vine staffs to hold the breaking line. They scream harsh orders over the deafening mechanical thunder of the modern weapons. The Roman commanders falsely assume they are facing an incredibly fast, invisible archer unit. They immediately order the famous testudo formation to completely cover their advance. Thousands of shields are violently locked together over their heads and on their fronts. It is a flawless, beautiful defensive maneuver that has survived countless brutal sieges. But the modern platoon leader simply watches the armored shell form and smiles coldly. Because a tightly packed formation is an absolute dream for a modern heavy machine gun. The two M240B gunners aggressively adjust their fire, aiming low at the locked shields. A 7.62 NATO round does not care about layered wood and Roman engineering. The heavier bullets violently punch straight through the thick, interlocking turtle shell. They rip through multiple bodies at once, turning the testudo into a bloody, trapped cage. Screams of absolute agony echo from inside the armored shell as men are pulverized. The formation violently collapses upon itself as the dead weigh down the living. The modern side is establishing brutal, absolute dominance in these early minutes. But the overwhelming technological advantage is masking a terrifying, hidden reality. The modern soldiers are aggressively burning through their limited ammunition supply. Empty magazines are hitting the muddy ground at an alarming, completely unsustainable rate. And the brutal environment is beginning to aggressively fight back against the modern tech. The freezing rain violently turns the hot gun barrels into hissing, steaming hazards. Thick white water vapor aggressively mixes with the burning gray cordite smoke.
A dense, suffocating cloud violently forms directly in front of the modern firing line. Visibility rapidly drops from 100 yards to a terrifying 30 feet. The modern squad leaders frantically scream to conserve ammo, but the deafening noise drowns them out. Platoon communication violently breaks down as the chaotic reality of battle takes over. Soldiers are firing blindly into the thick smoke, completely wasting precious bullets. Suddenly, one of the M249 automatic weapons violently seizes up and stops firing. A thick layer of wet mud has aggressively jammed the open belt feed mechanism.
The terrified gunner frantically rips at the hot receiver, trying to clear the fatal malfunction. That single mechanical failure violently cuts a massive hole in their interlocking wall of lead. The surviving Roman centurions instantly hear the terrifying thunder slightly weaken. They realize the invisible demon on the hill is not a god. It has to pause to breathe. Harsh, guttural screams echo through the smoke as the Roman commanders force the advance. The legion actively abandons the useless testudo, drastically changing their ancient tactics. They brutally climb over the massive piles of their own slaughtered comrades. They spread out, using the heavy white smoke to violently mask their rapid approach. Thousands of iron-tipped pila are violently raised into the freezing, rainy sky. The Roman infantry is finally within deadly throwing range of the modern firing line. The modern soldiers can hear the heavy, rhythmic stomping of boots just yards away. They can smell the terrifying mixture of wet leather, sweat, and hot blood in the fog. The overwhelming technological gap is violently crashing into the brutal reality of mass. An ocean of ancient iron is about to aggressively rain down on the unarmored modern lines. And 30 rounds in a magazine suddenly feels terrifyingly inadequate to stop an empire. A terrifying collective grunt echoes through the dense fog as thousands of arms pull back. The sky instantly darkens as a massive volley of heavy, iron-tipped pila is violently launched. 2,000 armor-piercing javelins arc blindly through the freezing rain and gun smoke. The modern platoon leader screams for his men to take immediate cover in the mud, but modern Kevlar helmets and ceramic plates were designed to stop high-velocity bullets. They were never meant to deflect a 3-pound iron spike falling from terminal velocity. A heavy javelin violently punches straight through a modern soldier's exposed shoulder. He screams in absolute agony, dropping his M4 into the deep, freezing puddle beneath him. Another javelin brutally shatters a radio operator's thigh, pinning him to the muddy ridge. The flawless, interlocking wall of modern suppressive fire is instantly and violently broken. Soldiers are forced to hide their heads, firing blindly over the muddy berm. This completely destroys their hit ratio and wastes massive amounts of precious ammunition. Desperate screams of "Winchester!" begin echoing down the modern firing line. It is the terrifying tactical code word for a soldier running completely out of bullets. The modern platoon is rapidly hitting the fatal physical limits of their advanced technology. The heavy rain continues to aggressively wash away the burning gun oil and critical lubrication. 2 more M4 carbines violently seize up, their bolts fused tightly to the hot receivers. Panicked soldiers frantically smash their weapons against the ground, begging them to work. The terrifying psychological weight of the ancient battlefield is actively crushing their minds. Modern infantry are trained to fight engagements separated by hundreds of yards of distance. They are not psychologically conditioned to watch thousands of screaming men rush them with swords. But the Roman commanders are experiencing a brutal, bloody learning curve of their own. They realize the deafening thunder from the ridge only kills in a straight, narrow line, and they notice the terrifying pauses when the modern weapons run completely dry.
A veteran centurion blows a sharp, three-note blast on his brass whistle. The legion aggressively splits, abandoning the suicidal, bloody frontal assault. Two massive cohorts break away into the dense, foggy woods on the left and right flanks. They are using their overwhelming numerical superiority to completely envelop the muddy ridge. The modern platoon leader desperately grabs his radio handset, screaming for close air support. But the digital frequency is completely dead, drowned out by atmospheric static and heavy rain. They are entirely alone, surrounded by an ocean of ancient, disciplined killers. He orders his men to violently shrink their defensive perimeter into a tight 360-degree circle.
This desperate maneuver sacrifices crucial ground to consolidate their rapidly shrinking firepower. The Roman infantry immediately swallows the abandoned ground, closing the gap to 50 feet. The modern soldiers begin violently ripping fragmentation grenades from their tactical vests. They pull the safety pins and aggressively hurl the explosive steel spheres down the slope. A chain of deafening, concussive blasts violently rips through the advancing Roman ranks. Hot steel shrapnel instantly shreds unarmored legs and tears through heavy leather boots. But a Roman legionnaire is brutally conditioned to step over the bleeding body of his brother. They do not flinch, they do not rout, and they absolutely do not stop marching. The explosive shockwaves temporarily clear the thick gun smoke from the muddy battlefield. The modern soldiers finally get a clear, terrifying look at exactly what is hunting them. Thousands of blood-soaked faces, completely devoid of fear, staring at them with cold murder. The physical exhaustion is heavily setting into the modern troops' muscles and lungs. Firing heavy weapons, clearing jams, and fighting raw terror drains human stamina in minutes. A panicked modern soldier makes a fatal, unforced tactical error in the chaotic noise. He stands up entirely too high to throw his final grenade into the muddy tree line. A Roman auxiliary archer spots the green silhouette and violently releases a heavy bowstring. The iron-tipped arrow brutally pierces the modern soldier's neck, just beneath his Kevlar helmet. He violently collapses backwards, choking on his own blood as the grenade rolls from his hand. It violently detonates inside the modern perimeter, showering his own squad with lethal dirt. The Roman centurions see the massive, chaotic break in the modern defensive line. They raise their swords and scream the final, terrifying order for brutal hand-to-hand combat. Thousands of steel gladii are violently drawn from their wooden scabbards in total unison. The metallic scraping sound completely overpowers the dying mechanical thunder of the rifles. The overwhelming technological gap has just violently collapsed into a primitive, muddy brawl. Modern optics and ceramic plates mean absolutely nothing when a blade slips under your ribcage. The Romans violently charge the final 20 feet, their shields raised to crush modern skulls. The remaining modern soldiers draw their combat knives and entrenching tools in pure desperation. They are entirely out of bullets, surrounded, and facing a meat grinder of ancient iron. A heavy Roman shield violently bashes a machine gunner straight in his face, shattering his jaw. The legionnaire immediately steps forward, violently thrusting his gladius into the gunner's gut. The terrifying reality of ancient, intimate slaughter has breached the modern lines. A modern assault rifle is merely a heavy metal club against a master of close-quarters sword combat. The platoon leader fires his final 3 pistol rounds into a charging centurion's face. But 5 more heavily armored legionnaires immediately step over the falling ancient officer. The modern circle of defense violently shrinks from 30 men to 20 to 10. They are drowning in a terrifying ocean of red shields, screaming mud, and flashing iron.
The turning point has passed, and the brutal execution of the modern era has officially begun. The muddy ridge completely transforms into a chaotic, terrifying slaughterhouse of ancient iron. Modern soldiers swing their empty rifles like heavy baseball bats in pure, desperate survival. But a Roman legionnaire spends his entire life mastering this exact, brutal fighting distance. They do not wildly swing their swords. They brutally thrust from behind the safety of their shields. A short, 2-inch stab from a gladius is enough to instantly puncture a modern lung or artery. The modern troops are severely outmatched in this terrifying, intimate form of violence. Their advanced hand-to-hand combat training is completely useless against a unified wall of shields. The platoon leader savagely shoves a Roman back and screams the final, desperate order. He orders a massive, immediate breakout to the dark tree line behind their shattered position. Surviving soldiers frantically pull the pins on their absolute last white smoke grenades. They throw the canisters directly at their own feet, enveloping the melee in blinding white fog. The Roman infantry physically recoils, mistaking the thick chemical smoke for dark magic or poison. This creates a tiny, 3-second window of tactical confusion in the ancient ranks. The surviving 12 modern soldiers aggressively charge the weakest point in the Roman encirclement. They ruthlessly trample the bloody mud, using raw adrenaline to push through the heavy shields. A modern soldier brutally buries his combat knife deep into a centurion's unarmored neck. They violently tear a small, bleeding hole through the dense, ancient formation. But the breakout demands an absolutely horrific, unforgiving price in modern blood. Roman flankers savagely hurl their remaining javelins into the backs of the fleeing soldiers. 5 more modern men brutally collapse into the deep mud, their spines shattered by heavy iron. The platoon leader aggressively drags his last remaining medic into the dark, freezing tree line. They desperately plunge into the dense brush, running blindly until their lungs burn with fire. Behind them, the deafening roar of Roman victory aggressively shakes the muddy valley. The ancient military machine has successfully consumed the modern defensive position. 7 exhausted, bleeding modern survivors are left shivering in the freezing European forest. They abandoned all their heavy weapon systems, their dead brothers, and their tactical pride. The Roman legion dominates the muddy ridge, standing completely victorious amidst the slaughter.
But this ancient victory is far from a clean, effortless military triumph. The muddy slope is completely carpeted with the shattered bodies of 2,000 dead Romans. Their unbreakable formations were brutally chewed to pieces by modern mechanical thunder. The surviving centurions carefully pick up the empty, muddy M4 carbines in complete silence. They stare at the strange black metal, unable to comprehend the terrifying power it once held. The modern side did not lose because their firearms were weak or ineffective. They lost because absolute technological superiority cannot survive terrible environmental variables. The freezing rain aggressively stripped away their optical advantage and caused fatal malfunctions. The deep, treacherous mud firmly anchored them in place, destroying their critical mobility. And their finite supply of ammunition was ruthlessly swallowed by an ocean of fearless men. A rifle without bullets is simply a poorly balanced club on an ancient battlefield. The Romans won because their entire military doctrine relies on absolute human endurance. They willingly absorbed apocalyptic losses simply to violently close the fatal distance. Because once the gap drops to 0, the battlefield forcefully resets to primal mechanics. Shield, muscle, iron, and an absolute fanatical willingness to die for the empire. Technology is merely a tool, completely bound by the brutal laws of physics and logistics.
When the supply chain completely collapses, the soldier with the sword dictates the outcome. Distance is the absolute life-saving armor of the modern infantrymen. Once that armor is stripped away, the ancient gods of war return to feast on the blood. The Roman Empire did not conquer the known world by being afraid of dying. They conquered it by understanding that a wall of men will eventually exhaust a wall of lead. The surviving modern soldiers are now hunted prey in an ancient, merciless world. So, what is your final verdict on this brutal, muddy clash of eras? Could ancient numbers and discipline ever truly overwhelm modern American firepower? Or would a different terrain have completely changed the bloody outcome of this simulation? Comment your verdict below. Could ancient numbers ever overcome modern firepower? And subscribe to Clash of Eras Warfare for the next impossible battle.